Wuckety buckety wuckety whack. Abracadabra dabra dack.
The Sword in the Stone. Believe it or not, in the very beginning of the movie's production, many of the big-name animators at the time were not on board with working on this film. Back in the early 60s, the 9 old men, along with other animators like Ken Anderson, had worked months on making an animated adaptation of Chanticleer, with storyboards, songs, and large paintings. The only one that wasn't interested was Disney's legendary storyman Bill Peet, who would often criticize their Chanticleer job and would go work alone on an idea of his own, which was a more light-hearted adaptation of the Once and Future King. By the time they finally presented their work to Walt Disney for their next movie, Walt finally stood up and said,
"You know, boys, that Chanticleer project sounds terrible. We're not doing that. But I do have an idea of what our next picture will be. Have you guys seen Bill's King Arthur project? It's pretty good, huh?"
Seriously, where the fridge was that info when I was doing Animation Look Back? Anyways, can the movie hold proudly the title of Walt Disney's last animated film he released alive? Or should he have gone with the Chanticleer idea? Let's find out. The story. You'd think that by mixing Disney animation and the King Arthur legend would lead to one of the most epic films they have ever made. Unfortunately though, that's not really the case. In fact, the movie's biggest downfall actually comes in the writing. With the way that the movie is built, it feels a lot less like one of their movies and more like one of their educational films, putting more emphasis on what Wart has to learn in order to achieve greatness in the future. You can even cut several scenes from each other and they would still work on their own as educational cartoons. It doesn't really help either that it also has problems with transitioning from one scene to the next. Like, are you sad that the girl squirrel is all alone at the end of that scene? Well, who cares? We got some magic plate shenanigans going on! On top of that, since you are able to cut the scenes individually, the movie rarely throws back anything that was mentioned beforehand. The only time that it ever does that was with that wolf who I swear came out of a Chuck Jones cartoon.
How do you ever expect to amount to anything without an education, I'd like to know? Even in these bungling, backward medieval times, you have got to know where you're going, don't you?
However, this is all how the story is structured on paper. In terms of its execution, it aims for a more lighthearted tone, which gives the film a double-edged sword. On one hand, as a Disney film, it works out well and makes it more fun and enjoyable with some good laughs thrown in. But then again, it takes away a lot of the sense of peril you'd find in many other Disney films. In fact, it's very rare when it feels like Wart is in actual danger and you would question if he would come out okay. But the biggest issue the movie would have actually comes in the ending. I'm sure a lot of you know how it ends, but just in case, I'll just put this up if you want to avoid spoilers. Now, the thing with the ending is that it feels like it just ends so abruptly. Wart becomes king, Merlin comes back from Bermuda, he makes a modern reference, and that's it! Nothing that shows us that Wart learned anything from Merlin, or an epilogue that shows how he became a great king by using brain over brawn. It leaves the movie to end off a bit empty-handed, and forgot something important to conclude Wart's journey to become King Arthur. Even if they made the best out of it, it's a bit disappointing how the guys at Disney came out with a story as weak as this. The animation. Ah yes, time for some good old classic hand-drawn animation straight from the 9 old men themselves, and this is one of the finest works that they've done. Of course, with the elements seen at first glance, they look fine enough as a feature film. The backgrounds are well crafted and can be nicely stylized like in London, and the character designs have a bit more of a cartoonier edge than most Disney films that fit the tone very nicely. And then you have the character animation, easily one of the movie's strongest assets. Many animators and film historians would often point to some of the scenes from this film as some of the 9 Old Men's greatest accomplishments. From Merlin packing all the stuff in his suitcase, to Mad Madam Mim introducing herself to Wart, to the beloved Wizard's Duel where Merlin and Mim turn into many different animals, these scenes would present a very high level of creativity and technical finesse that can only be delivered by some of the true masters of animation. However, with that said, even if some of the elements are among some of Disney's best, the overall look of the film does need some polishing. Considering how this is one of the first Disney films to use the Xerox process to color their films, you could tell how they were far from perfecting the technology, leaving many scenes look rather rough and how the characters look a bit sketchy than smooth. On top of that, you can easily notice how the animators had to cut corners in order to finish the animation fast, like reusing animation in another scene or moving things when they're supposed to be stationary. The animation overall might need a bit of tuning up, but it still has some of the greatest examples that Disney can do with the medium. The characters. If you look upon the legacy this film left today, you can easily point out who's more beloved and who's rather forgettable among the characters. Starting off with Wart, he doesn't really show much of a personality and is more like the blank canvas that the audience can fill themselves in his shoes so that they can imagine themselves get training from Merlin. At the most, the movie tries to make him like an underdog character, but even that is barely looked upon. The only thing that's memorable about him is his weird blank stares and his voice, since they were given by 3 actors, Ricky Sorensen and Richard and Robert Reitherman, which would explain exactly why Wart's voice sounds like his puberty is going on a roller coaster, even during the same scene.
Oh, it's you, Merlin, sir.
Yes, my lad. Now, have you ever considered being a squirrel?
Well, no, I don't suppose.
As for his family, they're really not that memorable as well. Kay is just the douchey brother, and Hector is the old trope of the tough dad that treats Wart harshly, but deep down he still loves him. But then comes what's arguably the saving grace of the entire film, Merlin and his assistant owl Archimedes. In terms of Merlin, he could arguably be the best Disney character from the 60s. He's the most powerful wizard in the world, but is wise enough to use his magic for good. He can easily be playful and eccentric, but can also have a short temper. He can see into the future and what technology will come true, but would rather stay in simpler times to ensure a better future. As for Archimedes, he plays more as the cynical comic relief reacting to what Merlin is doing with Wart, and he can often bring out some hilarious moments. But these two aren't the only memorable characters here. There is also Mad Madam Mim, who technically counts as the movie's villain. She is one of those characters that you can't help but love her for being so crazy and embracing how evil she can be. However, the only issue that does come with her is that she clearly does not have enough screen time. In fact, she would come in literally after an hour in. Because of this, she's just another obstacle for Merlin and Wart to face, like the pike and the wolf. The movie would have seriously benefited a lot if she would appear more as the film's overall antagonist. There are some here that can count as absolutely beloved in the world of Disney, but others could easily be tossed aside as forgettable. The songs. Interestingly enough, this is the first time that the Sherman Brothers would come in and work on an animated feature for Disney. However, it is a bit debatable if this would really count as a musical, since there are only 4 real musical numbers in the film. Funny enough though, the songs are rather split where half of them are great and the other half is forgettable. On one hand, you have That's What Makes the World Go Round and A Most Befuddling Thing.
For every up, there is a down. For every square,
There is a round?
yes. For every high,
There is a low?
yeah.
It's a most befuddling thing. And to every being of every kind, it is discombobulating.
These two are the forgettable ones since they're meant to push the educational aspect of the film, teaching Ward about life and love. That doesn't mean they're bad, it's just that educational is not the most appealing trait. Plus the fact that they can be easily overshadowed by the others, like Higitus Figitus and Mad Madam Mim, and that's where you can find the good half.
This is the best part now. Higitus Figitus Figitus Boom, Prestidigitonium! Higitus Figitus Figitus Boom, Prestidigitonium!
I find delight in the gruesome and grim.
Oh, that's terrible.
Thank you, my boy, but that's nothing for me. Oh,
Instead of putting their focus on teaching Ward a little lesson, these are all about the magical fun that makes the film enjoyable, and they even put to great use the signature whimsical tone that makes the Sherman Brothers songs timeless. There really isn't much else to say regarding the songs, but it is worth noting how the movie comes with an enjoyable soundtrack.
And to every being of every kind, it is
Out of all the animated features released by Walt Disney himself, The Sword in the Stone is easily one of the weakest. But does that mean the movie is bad? Well, I wouldn't say that. Sure, the writing is not all that good, and some people like Ward are forgettable, but it is still a Disney film worth noting for some great animation, fun songs, and other characters like Merlin that are absolutely lovable. I'd probably recommend this one if you're in the mood for something more lighthearted and fun. And if you are a Disney fan, then you should probably give this a watch as well. However, I'd also like to recommend that if you are going to watch this, then maybe put down your expectations. Yes, this is by Disney, but this is far from one of their best works. You might not love all that the movie offers, but you will take bits and pieces to cherish like a Disney classic. Hey guys, this is AniMat's. Now, what's actually really interesting about The Sword in the Stone is that this is the kind of film that's only remembered in parts, more so than the entire film in general. I mean, yeah, sure, it is made by Disney, but not a lot of people would remember Wart's adventure to fully become King Arthur, or really remember much of Wart in general. But, like I said before, this is the kind that each individual part, like just a few segments of it, that is where it's probably even more remembered than any other Disney film during its time. And I gotta say for myself that when it comes to Merlin, he's actually one of my favorite Disney characters, period. Just like the way that he is wise and eccentric at the same time, I feel like there's a bit of, like, kind of a bit of a resemblance to myself, and I feel like he's kind of like the person I would like to be. And also, considering that it is said that Merlin is a bit like kind of a caricature of Walt Disney himself. Like, sure, yeah, we all know about the nose, but there's also the way, like, his mannerisms and all that kind of stuff is really portrayed. Like, he's a lot more like Walt Disney than you think. It does add in this sense of admirability, and kind of like, there's a bit of a funny portrayal to him that really does make it enjoyable. And plus the fact that you do have Archimedes that really adds into the comedy, into the entire film. It just makes it overall fun. Like, I definitely don't regret watching The Sword in the Stone, especially not only with Merlin, but also with the animation segments. Like, a lot of the animated bits that really do stand out, like the Wizard's Duel, it's definitely fantastic. And at least by those parts, I'm glad that I'm at least glad that I watched it. I don't know if this is the kind of movie I would watch again and again, but at least just the scenes, absolutely I would. But anyways, that is pretty much going to be it with The Sword in the Stone, and it's now time that we go and move on to the animation hat. And by the way, if you guys would like to suggest an animated film you would like me to review and I would put into the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. Alright, so with that said, let's just go And, hold on. It's not as easy as last time when I picked her on the stone. Alright. Eventually I'll get it. Alright. Okay, there we go. We got one. So, the next review shall be... Oh, well. Well, I mean, the franchise is now revived, and, you know, it's pretty much big all over again. But, you know what? Let's go and take a moment and see the animated incarnation of it, instead of seeing all those live-action films.
No, well, don't you get any foolish ideas that magic will solve all your problems.